Real Reddit stories. If you love wild things and crazy drama, hit that subscribe button and drop a like to help more people find the madness.
After years of abuse, my parents tried to rewrite history and pretend we were a happy family. I collected proof of every lie they told, and then chose a revenge so subtle they never even saw it coming. Ever since I was a kid, my mom made it crystal clear that if my dad tried to praise or reward me, all hell would break loose. I remember being 9 years old, and my mom yelling at me for overeating at dinner. Tears filled my eyes, and I looked up at my dad, hoping he'd stand up for me. "Honey, don't you think you're being a little unreasonable?" My mom stormed off without letting him finish. That was the last time my dad ever tried to be nice to me. One time when I was 12 and had gotten dirt on my shoes, my mom took a deep breath to prepare for her yelling, but my dad beat her to it. "Son, you're almost a teenager, and you still haven't learned how to stop being a worthless piece of crap?" I looked down at the ground, trying to put my tongue to the roof of my mouth to stop myself from crying. In the corner of my eye, I saw my mom with a huge smile on her face. She hugged my dad and even whispered "good job" into his ear. It was then that I realized our family was about my mom, not about me. And as I got older, the yelling turned to violence, and I hated my parents. Every time my dad did something wrong, like forget to load the dishwasher or not immediately reject a woman who was simply looking in his general direction, he'd make it up to her through me. Through trashing my room and forcing me to tidy it up, by waking me up at 4 a.m. on a Saturday morning to clean the entire house top to bottom. It always worked for a while, but it was never enough for her. And one day, he started to realize that. I was using her phone as a calculator for my homework when I saw a notification pop up. "You look so good last night," it said, from a number I didn't recognize. My curiosity piqued, and I read through their entire chat. A chaotic excitement immediately filled my veins. If I could just show my dad what she's been doing, maybe he'd be on my team again, I thought to myself. But as soon as my hopes went up, they were shot down. Because when I showed him the texts, his hand aggressively met my face. "How dare you go through your mother's phone," he said. But at this point, I was so desensitized to his violence that I didn't respond, just went back to doing my homework. But things changed after that. My dad started making eye contact with me again, became a little quieter during disagreements, wailed on me a little less. It was around this time that I ended up moving out for college and going NC with my mom. And the most contact I had with my dad was a yearly Merry Christmas and Happy Birthday text, because I was done, especially after seeing all my friends' parents who seemed to fight over who loved them more, not less. Fast forward 4 years later. I'm now 23, and my dad invited me over last Thanksgiving. By this point, I had a bachelor's degree in engineering, a solid beginner's job, and a pretty good car, so I felt secure in myself enough to attend. Plus, after years of therapy and real friendship, I had come to the conclusion that my mom's opinion means nothing to me, and my dad's a little beach if he tries to put me down this time. When I showed up, I didn't know what to expect, but it definitely wasn't my dad greeting me with a hug. The first hug he'd given me since I was a child. I still kept my guard up, but hugged him back. My mom was still cooking while we caught up. There was a lot of tension, but for the first time in a while, I had hope. That's when we sat down for dinner. I planned on staying quiet, only speaking when spoken to, basically maintaining the dinner time procedure from my childhood. "Ahem," my mom said, staring at my dad. I immediately realized my elbows were on the table and took a deep breath, bracing for impact. "Honey, he's not a kid anymore. We don't have to do that stuff." My eyes widened when he said this, and I could see rage form in my mom's eyes. "I knew you never loved me," she muttered under her breath before continuing to eat. At that moment, something in my dad's brain clicked. The air of the room changed, and I knew my mom noticed it too. He took his phone out and started going through his camera roll. There was a lot of aggression in his voice. "Remember when I bought you this? Remember when I planned this date for you? What have you ever done for me?" My mom's face went red, and this time she was the one to go silent. There was a long pause, and my dad was zoned out with his eyebrows furrowed. Then came his light bulb moment. "You've only ever loved me when I hurt our son," he said, his voice completely steady. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but then he just left. Well, there was no way I was being left alone with my mom, so I followed him to his car. "Son, I let you down. I'm sorry." A smile filled my face. Those were the words I'd been waiting for my entire life. I sat in the passenger seat and hugged him, but behind my smile was something much darker. You see, as much as I appreciated the apology, it was simply too little, too late, and I was going to make them both pay for the trauma they gave me. I sat in my dad's car for what felt like forever, neither of us saying much. The engine wasn't even running. We just sat there in the cold November air, watching our breath fog up the windows. I think we were both processing what had just happened inside. "So what now?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. My dad rubbed his face with both hands. He looked older than I remembered, more worn down. "I don't know, son. I really don't know." I nodded, not sure what else to say. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to list every single time he'd failed me, every time he'd chosen her over me. But another part of me just felt empty, like there wasn't even enough energy left to be angry anymore. "I should probably go," I said, reaching for the door handle. "Wait," my dad said, grabbing my arm. Not roughly like he would have in the past, but almost desperately. Can we get a coffee or something? I think we should talk." I hesitated. I had a 4-hour drive back to my apartment, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear whatever he had to say, but curiosity got the better of me. "Fine, one coffee." We drove separately to a nearby Denny's, the only place open on Thanksgiving night. The restaurant was practically empty except for a few truckers and what looked like other refugees from family dinners gone wrong. We slid into a booth, and a tired-looking waitress named Debbie took our order. "So," I said after our coffees arrived, "you wanted to talk?" My dad stared into his mug like it held the answers to all of life's questions. "I've been seeing a therapist," he said finally. That was literally the last thing I expected him to say. My dad was old school, the kind of guy who thought therapy was for weak people who can't handle their problems. I nearly spit out my coffee. "For how long? I asked. About 6 months now, he replied. After your mom's incident. What incident? He looked surprised. You don't know? I thought maybe that's why you agreed to come for Thanksgiving. I shook my head, completely lost. Your mom had a breakdown back in May. She got fired from her job for screaming at her boss, then crashed her car into a grocery store display window. Nobody was hurt, but she got ordered to do anger management and therapy as part of her probation. I sat back, processing this information. It was hard to imagine my mom in therapy. She'd always acted like she was perfect, and everyone else was the problem. So you started therapy because of her? I asked. Kind of. The court suggested couples counseling too, and I went along with it at first just to support her. But then my therapist suggested I might benefit from some individual sessions. He took a sip of his coffee. That's when I started to realize how fucked up everything was. How fucked up I was. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? Congratulations on finally realizing you were an abusive father. Didn't seem appropriate. I know it doesn't change anything, he continued. I know I can't take back what I did to you, but I want you to know I see it now. I see what we did, what I did, and I'm sorry. I nodded, still not trusting myself to speak. This was surreal. After years of fantasizing about my dad acknowledging the abuse, it was actually happening. But instead of feeling vindicated or relieved, I just felt numb. What about Mom? I finally asked. Is therapy helping her too? My dad's face darkened. She stopped going after the mandatory sessions ended. Says it's all bullshit, and the therapist was biased against her. That's why I was surprised when she agreed to have you over for Thanksgiving. I thought maybe she was making progress too. Clearly not, I said, remembering her reaction at dinner. No, he agreed. Clearly not. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffees. The waitress came by and refilled our mugs without asking. I guess we looked like we needed it. I'm leaving her, my dad said suddenly. I've been planning it for a few months now. I've got an apartment lined up and everything. I was going to wait until after the holidays, but after tonight, he shrugged. What's the point in waiting? Again, I was blindsided. My parents had been together for over 25 years. Despite everything, I never imagined them apart. What are you going to do? I asked. Start over, I guess. Try to build a life that isn't based on whatever the hell our marriage was based on. He looked at me directly. I'd like to try to build a relationship with you too, if you're willing. A real one this time. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to give him a chance, but another part, the darker part that had been growing inside me for years, whispered that it was too late, that he didn't deserve forgiveness, that he and my mom both needed to pay for what they'd done to me. I need time to think about it, I said finally. He nodded. I understand. Take all the time you need. We finished our coffees in silence, and he paid the bill despite my half-hearted attempt to split it. We walked out to the parking lot together. Drive safe, he said, giving me an awkward pat on the shoulder. You too, I replied automatically. I got in my car and watched him drive away, presumably back to the house where my mom was still sitting at that Thanksgiving table, stewing in her anger. For a brief moment, I felt sorry for him having to go back there, but then I remembered all the times he'd chosen to stay, all the times he'd participated in my abuse to keep her happy, and the sympathy evaporated. The drive back to my apartment was long and dark. I had plenty of time to think about everything that had happened. By the time I pulled into my parking spot, I had made a decision. I was going to give my dad a chance, one chance, to prove he had really changed. But my mom, she was going to get exactly what she deserved. I spent the next few weeks plotting. I know that sounds dramatic, but that's literally what I was doing. I started by gathering evidence. I still had screenshots of those texts from when my mom was cheating years ago. I also had emails, voice messages, and even some videos documenting the abuse I'd suffered. I'd been collecting them for years, almost subconsciously, like I always knew this day would come. I created a private Instagram account and started uploading everything there. The texts, the emails where my mom called me worthless, the video I'd secretly recorded when I was 17, where she threw a plate at my head for getting a B in chemistry, the voicemail where she drunkenly told me she wished I'd never been born. All of it, carefully organized and time-stamped. Then I started reaching out to people from my past, former teachers who had suspected something was wrong but never intervened, neighbors who had heard the screaming, even my mom's sister, my Aunt Rachel, who had stopped coming around when I was about 14 because she couldn't stand to watch how my mom treated me. I always knew something wasn't right in that house, Aunt Rachel told me when we met for lunch in December. I tried to talk to your mom about it a few times, but she would get so defensive. Eventually, she just cut me off completely. Did you ever think about calling CPS? I asked, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. She looked down at her plate. I should have. I know that now. I guess I told myself it wasn't that bad, that I was overreacting. I'm so sorry, Michael. I nodded, accepting her apology, even though it didn't really change anything. But Aunt Rachel was useful. She had stories about my mom from childhood, about patterns of behavior that went back decades. She also had contact information for other family members who had distanced themselves from my mom over the years. More pieces for my puzzle. Meanwhile, my dad kept texting me, just casual stuff at first, asking how work was going, sending me articles about engineering projects he thought I might find interesting. Then he started opening up more, sharing insights from his therapy sessions, admitting specific things he'd done wrong in the past. Remember when I threw out your science fair project because you got a higher grade than your cousin? I've been thinking about that a lot lately. It was cruel, and I'm sorry. I should have protected you from your mother's anger. Instead, I used you as a shield. You deserved better. Each text was like a tiny piece of validation. All those years I'd spent wondering if I was crazy, if I was exaggerating the abuse in my head. Here was proof that it had been real, that it had been as bad as I remembered. I decided to meet up with my dad again just before Christmas. We went to a real restaurant this time, not Denny's. He looked better than he had at Thanksgiving, less haunted, more present. I did it, he said as soon as we sat down. I moved out last weekend. I'm in my new apartment now. How did Mom take it? I asked, genuinely curious. He grimaced. About how you'd expect. There was screaming, crying, threats. She threw my clothes out on the front lawn and set fire to my favorite chair. Jesus, I muttered. Yeah, the neighbors called the cops, but she had calmed down by the time they arrived. Put on her sweet, confused wife act. He shook his head. I'm filing for divorce after the new year. I nodded, taking a sip of my water. Have you told anyone else? Just my brother and my therapist. I'm not ready for the whole family interrogation yet. He paused. I haven't told them everything. About how I treated you, I mean. I'm still working up to that. Part of me wanted to say, don't worry, Dad. They'll all know soon enough. But I kept that to myself. I was thinking, he continued, maybe you could come see my new place sometime. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and quiet. We could watch a game or something. I agreed, more out of curiosity than any real desire to bond. I wanted to see this new life he was creating for himself. Wanted to see if it was real or just another act fact. His apartment was exactly as he'd described it. Small, clean, and quiet. A one-bedroom in a decent part of town, furnished with what looked like the bare minimum from IKEA. No personal touches yet, no photos or decorations. It was the apartment of someone starting from scratch. We ordered pizza and watched basketball, making awkward small talk during the commercials. It was weird being alone with my dad without the threat of my mom's anger hanging over us. I kept waiting for him to snap, to revert back to the man I'd grown up with, but he didn't. As I was leaving, he handed me a small wrapped package. "Early Christmas present," he said. "You don't have to open it now." I waited until I got to my car to unwrap it. Inside was a framed photo of me at my college graduation. I hadn't even known he was there. I certainly hadn't invited him. But there I was in my cap and gown, smiling with my friends. He must have been watching from a distance. There was a note with the photo. "I missed so many important moments in your life because I was a coward. I'm trying not to be a coward anymore." I stared at the note for a long time before putting the frame back in its wrapping and driving home. The dark part of me wanted to throw it away, to reject this peace offering as too little, too late. But another part, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, felt something soften inside me. That feeling didn't last long, though. The next day, my mom called me for the first time in years. I let it go to voicemail, but her message made my blood boil. "Michael, it's your mother. I don't know what lies your father has been telling you, but he's having some kind of midlife crisis. He's not well. I need you to talk some sense into him. Call me back." Not a word about her behavior at Thanksgiving. Not a hint of apology for years of abuse. Just the same old manipulation, trying to turn me against my dad, trying to use me as a pawn in their twisted game. I didn't call her back. Instead, I added the voicemail to my Instagram collection and continued with my plan. By mid-January, I had everything I needed. My private Instagram account was full of evidence. I had statements from family members, former teachers, and neighbors. I had my own detailed accounts of specific incidents of abuse, and I had a list of everyone who needed to see it all. My mom's employer, her church group, her book club, her siblings and cousins, my dad's family, the neighbors, everyone who had ever bought into her perfect mother act over the years. I hesitated when it came to my dad. Should I include him in the mass email I was planning to send? On one hand, he had been an abuser too. On the other, he seemed to be genuinely trying to change, to make amends. In the end, I decided to warn him, not because he deserved it, but because I wanted to see how he would react. I called him on a Tuesday evening in late January. "Dad, I need to tell you something," I said as soon as he picked up. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" The concern in his voice sounded genuine. "I'm fine, but I'm about to do something that's going to affect you, and I thought you should know in advance." "Okay?" he said cautiously. "I'm going to expose Mom. Everything she did to me. Everything you both did. I have evidence, testimonials from other people. I'm sending it all out tomorrow. To her work, her friends, our family, everyone." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I waited, curious to see if the old dad would emerge, if he would threaten me or try to defend her. "I understand," he said finally, his voice quiet. "You're not going to try to stop me?" I asked, surprised. "Number, you have every right to tell your story. What we did to you was wrong, and if this is what you need to do to heal, then that's what you should do." I hadn't expected that. I'd been prepared for anger, for manipulation, for him to revert to his old ways. His acceptance threw me off balance. "I'll be included in this too, I assume?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted. "I can't tell the story without including your part in it." "That's fair," he said. "Just, can I ask one thing?" "What?" "Can you mention that I'm in therapy now? That I'm trying to change? Not to excuse what I did, just, I don't want to lose my job over this. I need to be able to support myself now that I'm on my own." I thought about it. It was a reasonable request, and unlike my mom, he had actually apologized and shown remorse. "I can do that," I said. "Thank you." He paused. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, even if it's against us." After we hung up, I sat at my computer, staring at the email I had drafted. It was addressed to over 50 people, with a link to the Instagram account and a brief explanation of what they would find there. My finger hovered over the send button. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to blow up my family's life? My mom would be humiliated, possibly lose her job. My dad would have to face the judgment of everyone who knew him. And me? What would I get out of it? Justice, whispered that dark part of me. Validation, revenge. But another voice, maybe the voice of my therapist, asked, "Will this actually help you heal, or will it just keep you trapped in the cycle of pain?" I closed my laptop without sending the email. I needed more time to think. The next day, I got a text from my dad. "Whatever you decide, I support you." That text was the tipping point. Not because it made me feel better about my dad, but because it made me realize something important. I was still letting my parents control my actions. My whole plan for exposure and revenge was still all about them. I was still defining myself in relation to them, still letting them dictate my emotional state. I didn't want that anymore. I wanted to be free of them, truly free, not just physically distant, but emotionally untethered. And maybe the way to do that wasn't through some grand act of revenge, but through simply letting go. I deleted the draft email. I made the Instagram account private so only I could see it. I kept all the evidence, all the testimonials, not to use as a weapon, but as a reminder to myself that I wasn't crazy, that what happened to me was real. Then I called my therapist and scheduled an emergency session. "I think I'm having some kind of breakdown," I told her. "Or maybe a breakthrough? I don't know." We spent 2 hours talking through everything. The Thanksgiving dinner, my dad's apology, my mom's voicemail, my revenge plan, and ultimately, my decision not to go through with it. "What do you want your relationship with your parents to look like going forward?" she asked me. "With my mom? Nothing. I don't want a relationship with her at all. She hasn't changed, and I don't think she ever will." "And your dad?" That was harder to answer. "I don't know. Part of me wants to give him a chance. He seems genuinely sorry, and he's actually doing the work in therapy. But another part of me is still so angry. I don't know if I can ever fully trust him." "You don't have to decide everything right now," she reminded me. "Healing isn't linear, and forgiveness isn't an all-or-nothing proposition. You can take small steps, set boundaries, see how it goes." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I didn't have to have all the answers today. I could take my time, protect myself, and see what felt right as I went along. Over the next few months, I established a cautious relationship with my dad. We'd meet for dinner every couple of weeks, or he'd come over to watch a game. We kept the conversations light at first, but gradually started talking about deeper things, his therapy progress, my career goals, even some careful reminiscing about the few good memories from my childhood. One night in April, after we'd had a few beers, he brought up my mom. "She's been calling me a lot," he said, alternating between threatening me and phone begging me to come back. Are you tempted? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. He shook his head firmly. Not even a little bit. I feel free. For the first time in decades, I feel like I can breathe. He took a swig of his beer. The divorce should be finalized next month. She's fighting it every step of the way, but my lawyer says there's nothing she can do to stop it. That's good, I said, and I meant it. The thought of them getting back together made my stomach turn. There's something else, he said, looking uncomfortable. She's been asking about you, wants to know if I've seen you, how you're doing. I tensed up immediately. What did you tell her? Nothing specific, just that I've talked to you a few times and you're doing well. I didn't mention that we've been meeting up regularly. I nodded, relieved. The last thing I needed was my mom showing up at my apartment or workplace. She wants to see you, he continued. Says she misses you. I laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. Yeah, I bet she does. She misses having someone to control and belittle. My dad didn't argue with that. I told her I wouldn't pressure you, that it was entirely up to you if you wanted contact with her. I don't, I said firmly. Not now, maybe not ever. I understand, he said, and I'll respect that. I won't pass on messages or try to play mediator. We sat in silence for a while, the TV murmuring in the background. Can I ask you something? I said finally. Something I've always wondered? Of course. Why did you stay with her for so long? Why did you let her treat me that way? Was it just because you loved her that much? He was quiet for a long time, staring at his beer bottle. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. I didn't stay because I loved her. I stayed because I was afraid of her, afraid of what she might do if I tried to leave, afraid of being alone, afraid of admitting I'd made a terrible mistake. He looked up at me, his eyes wet. And I used you as a buffer. As long as her anger was directed at you, it wasn't directed at me. It was cowardly and unforgivable. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me appreciated his honesty, but another part was freshly angry at the confirmation that he'd sacrificed me to save himself. I know I can never make it up to you, he continued, but I want you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm trying to be a better person, a better father if you'll let me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We finished our beers in silence, and he left shortly after. I sat alone in my apartment for a long time, thinking about everything he'd said. The truth was, I didn't know if I could ever fully forgive my dad. The damage he'd done was too deep, too fundamental, but I was starting to believe that he was genuinely sorry, that he was really trying to change, and maybe that was enough for now. Not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to see where this new version of our relationship might go. As for my mom, my feelings were much simpler. I wanted nothing to do with her. The thought of seeing her, of hearing her voice, still filled me with a mixture of dread and rage. She had shown no remorse, no self-awareness, no desire to change. She was still the same manipulative, abusive person she'd always been. But even with her, I was starting to feel something new. Indifference. Not complete indifference. I wasn't there yet, but the beginnings of it. The realization that she didn't have power over me anymore unless I gave it to her. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to expose her or humiliate her. I just needed to live my life on my own terms, free from her influence. That would be the best revenge of all, or so I thought. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It was a Tuesday in May when the curveball came. I was at work, buried in spreadsheets for a project deadline, when my phone buzzed with a text from my dad. Your mom's in the hospital. Attempted sewer slide last night. She's stable now. I stared at my phone for a solid minute, not sure how to feel. Part of me felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. Another part felt a weird mix of shock and something like guilt, even though I knew logically this wasn't my fault. I texted back asking which hospital, then told my boss I had a family emergency. The drive to the hospital was surreal. I hadn't seen my mom in over a year at this point. I wasn't even sure why I was going. Morbid curiosity? Some lingering sense of obligation? Or maybe I just needed to see for myself that she was really okay, despite everything. My dad was sitting in the waiting room when I arrived, looking exhausted. He stood up when he saw me, surprise clear on his face. You came, he said. I shrugged. Yeah, I don't know why exactly, but I'm here. He filled me in on what happened. Apparently my mom had been spiraling since the divorce was finalized. She'd lost her job for showing up drunk, and most of her friends had distanced themselves after hearing about the divorce drama. She'd taken a bunch of pills with alcohol, but then called 911 herself. The doctors think she didn't really want to die, my dad explained. More like a cry for help. I nodded, not sure what to say. It was hard to feel sympathy for her after everything, but I didn't want her unalived either. Can I see her? I asked. She's sleeping now. They sedated her pretty heavily, but maybe later. He hesitated. You don't have to stay, you know. I just thought you should know what happened. I'll stay for a bit, I said, surprising myself. We sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs, drinking terrible hospital coffee. My dad looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Why are you here? I finally asked him. You're divorced. She's not your responsibility anymore. He sighed. I know, but there's no one else. Her sister lives across the country, and she's alienated pretty much everyone else in her life. He rubbed his face. I don't love her anymore, but I was married to her for 25 years. I can't just not care at all. I understood that, weirdly enough. No matter how much I wanted to not care about my mom, there was still some tiny part of me that did, not in a healthy way, but in that complicated way you care about someone who's hurt you deeply. A doctor came out a few hours later and told us my mom was awake. We could see her if we wanted to, but only for a short visit. She needed rest. You go first, I told my dad. I need a minute. While he was in with her, I paced the hallway, trying to decide what to say. Should I be angry? Sympathetic? Distant? I had no script for this situation. When my dad came out, he looked drained. She's asking for you, he said. I took a deep breath and walked into the room. My mom looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors. Her hair was a mess, and without makeup, I could see how much she'd aged. She looked up when I entered, and her eyes filled with tears. Michael, she said, her voice raspy. You came. I stood awkwardly at the foot of her bed. Yeah, Dad texted me. I didn't think you'd come, she said. Not after everything. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know I was a terrible mother. I froze. In all my life, I had never heard my mom apologize for anything, let alone admit she was a bad parent. I immediately felt suspicious. Was this just another manipulation? A ploy for sympathy? The doctors say I have to do therapy, she continued when I didn't respond. As part of my treatment plan, they think I have issues. No shit, I thought, but didn't say. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I just wanted you to know that I know I was wrong about a lot of things. I still didn't trust it, but I nodded again. Okay, we sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. I was about to leave when she spoke again. Your father told me he's been seeing you, that you two are talking again. I tensed up, shooting a glance at the door where my dad had disappeared. Yeah, sometimes. That's good, she said, surprising me. He was always a better father than I was a mother. Even with all the, I didn't know what to make of that. It sounded almost like she was acknowledging my dad's abuse too, which was completely out of character for her. I should go, I said, uncomfortable with the whole situation. I hope you feel better. Michael, she called as I reached the door. Will you come see me again? Maybe? When I'm out of here? I turned back to look at her. She seemed genuinely vulnerable, genuinely sad, but I'd seen her put on acts before. I don't know, I said honestly. I need to think about it. She nodded, looking down at her hands. I understand. I left the room feeling completely disoriented. This wasn't the mom I knew. My mom didn't apologize. She didn't admit fault. She didn't look sad and small and broken. My dad was waiting in the hallway. How did it go? He asked. Weird, I said. Really weird. She apologized to me, said she was a terrible mother. My dad's eyebrows shot up. That's unexpected. Yeah, I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. She asked if I'd come see her again after she gets out. Will you? I shrugged. I honestly have no idea. We left the hospital together, and my dad suggested we grab some real food at a diner nearby. Over burgers and fries, we talked about my mom's situation. The hospital's keeping her for 72-hour observation, he explained. After that, they're recommending an inpatient treatment program for a few weeks, for depression and alcohol abuse. Is she going to do it? She says she will, but you know your mom, she changes her mind a lot. I nodded, pushing my fries around on my plate. Do you think she meant it? The apology? My dad considered this. I don't know, maybe. Near-death experiences can change people's perspectives, or it could be the meds talking, or she could be manipulating us again. He sighed. I guess time will tell. Time did tell, but not in the way I expected. My mom actually followed through with the inpatient program, and then continued with therapy afterward. I didn't visit her right away, but my dad kept me updated. He'd check in on her occasionally, making sure she was taking her meds and going to appointments. About 2 months after her sewer slide attempt, I agreed to meet her for coffee. I picked a public place, told my dad where I'd be, and limited it to 30 minutes. All precautions in case this was some elaborate trap. She was already at the coffee shop when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. She'd remembered how I take my coffee, black with 1 sugar. It was such a small thing, but it caught me off guard. Thanks for coming, she said as I sat down. Sure, I replied, still cautious. She looked better than she had in the hospital. Her hair was neatly styled and she was wearing makeup, but not the excessive amount she used to wear. She seemed softer somehow. How's your job going? She asked. Your father mentioned you were working on a big project. We made awkward small talk for a few minutes. It was the strangest conversation I'd ever had with my mom. No criticism, no backhanded compliments, no guilt trips, just normal questions about my life, with actual listening when I answered. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. What's going on, Mom? Why are you being like this? She looked down at her coffee. Like what? Nice, normal. Like you actually care what I have to say. She flinched slightly at that. I deserve that, she said quietly. I know I do. She took a deep breath before continuing. My therapist says I have narcissistic personality disorder and borderline tendencies and alcohol use disorder. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Quite the collection, right? I didn't laugh. I was too shocked that she was acknowledging any of this. She says I've been self-medicating for years, using alcohol to manage emotions I don't know how to process. She looked up at me. That's not an excuse, just an explanation. Okay, I said, not sure where this was going. I'm on medication now, for depression and anxiety, and I haven't had a drink in 63 days. There was a hint of pride in her voice. That's good, I said, and meant it. Whatever else she'd done, sobriety was a positive step. I've been doing a lot of thinking about why I treated you the way I did, she continued. My therapist says I was jealous of the attention your father gave you, that I saw you as competition instead of as my child. She shook her head. It sounds so stupid when I say it out loud. It did sound stupid, but it also made a weird kind of sense. It explained why she'd get so angry whenever my dad showed me any kindness. I know I can't undo the damage I've done, she said. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry, Michael. More than I can express. I sat there, stunned. This was the apology I'd fantasized about for years, the acknowledgement I'd craved. But now that it was happening, I didn't know how to feel. I don't expect forgiveness, she added when I didn't respond. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to change. For myself, but also because I hope someday we might have some kind of relationship. Not like before, something healthier. I nodded slowly. I appreciate you saying all this, but I need time to process it. Of course, she said quickly. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. We finished our coffees in silence, and then I made an excuse about needing to get back to work. As I stood to leave, she reached out like she wanted to hug me, then stopped herself. Thank you for coming, she said instead. Yeah, I replied. Take care of yourself, Mom. Over the next year, my relationship with both my parents evolved in ways I never could have predicted. My dad and I grew closer. We started doing normal father-son stuff, watching sports, working on his car, even taking a fishing trip. He wasn't perfect, and sometimes he'd say or do things that triggered old memories, but he was trying. And when he messed up, he'd apologize immediately and genuinely. My mom was a more complicated story. I kept my distance at first, only meeting her in public places for short periods. But as months passed and she stayed consistent with her therapy and sobriety, I cautiously allowed her more space in my life. We'd never have the close mother-son relationship you see in movies, but we developed something that was at least not actively harmful. The real test came last Thanksgiving, exactly 1 year after that disastrous dinner that had changed everything. My dad suggested we all have dinner together at a restaurant, neutral territory. Are you sure that's a good idea? I asked him. Probably not, he admitted. But your mom's been asking, and I thought maybe, I don't know, maybe it would be good closure for all of us. I agreed reluctantly, and we met at a nice steakhouse downtown. The first few minutes were awkward as hell, all of us overly polite, tiptoeing around each other. But gradually, the conversation became more natural. My mom asked about my new apartment, my dad talked about a woodworking class he was taking, and I shared stories about a recent work trip. No one yelled, no one cried, no one stormed out. It was just dinner. Normal, boring dinner with 2 people who happened to be my parents. As we were finishing dessert, my mom cleared her throat. I want to thank you both, she said, for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it. My dad and I exchanged glances. Neither of us was quite comfortable with emotional moments like this. We're all just doing our best, my dad said finally. I nodded in agreement. One day at a time, right? It wasn't perfect. We all still had our issues, our triggers, our bad days. My mom would occasionally slip into old patterns when she was stressed, though she'd catch herself faster now. My dad still struggled with setting boundaries. And me? I was still working through years of trauma and therapy, but we were trying. All of us, in our own ways, were trying to be better than we had been. And maybe that's all anyone can really do. As I drove home that night, I thought about how differently things had turned out from what I'd planned a year ago. I'd been so focused on revenge, on making my parents pay for what they'd done. But in the end, the best revenge wasn't exposure or humiliation. It was building a life that wasn't defined by them or their abuse. It was finding my own path to healing. I still had that private Instagram account with all the evidence. I kept it as a reminder, not of what I'd suffered, but of how far I'd come. From a scared kid who couldn't stand up for himself to a man who could set boundaries and demand respect. From someone consumed by anger and pain to someone working towards something like peace. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. My parents didn't magically transform into perfect people. Our relationships would always be complicated, always carry the scars of the past. But they were relationships I chose to have now, on my terms, with my boundaries firmly in place. And that made all the difference.